Okay, Derek McLane, you were the production. Good. How are you?
Good thing.
Um, you're welcome. You were the production designer on The Wiz Live. Uh,
Yes.
so The Wizard of Oz and The Wiz have been around for decades.
Yeah.
Uh, Talk about putting your personal stamp on it as the production designer.
Well, one of the, Kenny Leon, the director, and I talked a lot about the show at the beginning, and the thing that we kept thinking about the story is that the story is really Dorothy's dream, and which led us to then think about who is Dorothy in the context of the story. That Dorothy is a contemporary African American woman living in rural Kansas who wants to get away. And we kind of then imagined a whole scenario for her life. Why does she want to get away? We decided she's sees herself as more sophisticated than the other farmhands. That she doesn't believe that she's really meant to live in Kansas the rest of her life. We imagined she wanted to travel, and so Kenny kept saying to me, "It's Dorothy's dream. Where does Dorothy? What would Dorothy dream? She gets to dream anything she wants. Psychologists always say you get to dream whatever dream you want. What does Dorothy dream about?" And the best way I knew to do that for myself was to make it personal and think about, what would my dream for this be, channeled through Dorothy. And I drew on a lot of personal experiences, especially as a child. We lived abroad for many years. We lived in India, and we traveled around Asia. And as a young child, and it was so exotic to me and so gorgeous and strange and otherworldly. And I thought, well, what if Oz is based on her imaginings of Asia? It doesn't have to be real exactly, but what if? So therefore, what if Munchkinland became felt like an Asian temple complex? And and what if the cornfields? The other thing that's interesting about dreams is the way in your dream, real things and kind of imagined things get all mixed up. So very frequently there are elements of your family and elements of your own house, and yet it feels totally different and totally strange. And so one of the things I tried to do was to mix elements of Kansas with this kind of Asian dream. And so, for example, when she meets the scarecrow in the cornfields, there was corn, but the corn was growing in terraced fields, such as you would see in Vietnam or Cambodia, or even China. So they were like terraced rice paddies, except instead of growing rice, they were growing corn. And so that sort of became the logic for the world of the Wiz.
That's really interesting. So you've got a lot of experience in not only Broadway productions, but also in live television productions.
Uh-huh.
Of special interest to our readers, since we're an awards website, you've worked on a couple of Oscar telecasts.
I have. I just finished my fourth year of doing the Oscars.
Man, that's amazing. So all of these experiences, I guess, really benefited you in taking on this live television production of The Wiz. Can you talk a bit about that?
Well, sure. I guess one of the things that I've learned a fair amount about over the last several years is what works on camera, what works on camera, and what doesn't work as well on camera, and how a digital camera perceives things, which is not exactly the same as a film camera, and it's certainly not the same as the naked eye. And that can be both a hindrance, and it also can be a great help. But just learning about sort of how that behaves has been incredibly useful.
Mm-hmm. So there's so many really spectacular sets in this thing. I want to talk about a couple of individual ones. You're welcome. One of the things I really enjoyed was when you were introducing the characters in Oz of the Cowardly Lion and the Scarecrow and the Tin Man. You introduced them each in these kind of unique settings.
Yeah.
Can you talk a bit about that?
Well, so the show, really is a journey through us. So not only did she meet these three friends of hers who become, incredibly important, um, but they also, they're tasked with, it's a journey to get to the Emerald City. They're told that, in order for Dorothy to go home, Dorothy's told in order to go home, she needs to go see the Wiz in Emerald City, and so that's the journey. And it's a classic adventure story in that way, in that they've got to travel from one place to another and overcome various obstacles along the way. They encounter enemies. They encounter the sort of weird tree-like people in the forest. They encounter the seductive poppies in the poppy field. So these are things that they've got to overcome and get past. Along the way. And each time they do that, each time that happens, we discover something else about the friends. We discover Dorothy's determination and intelligence. We discover the lion's, of course, bravery. This is all well known to us from The Wizard of Oz. But part of this journey, through these different lands and landscapes is about. It's where you meet these people, but you also discover things about them each step of the way, and that's part of what creates the incredible bond between the four friends.
Mm-hmm. So I loved when you get to the Emerald City.
Yeah.
I loved that, and I also loved the design of the Wiz's inner chambers.
Uh-huh.
Can you talk a bit about
the inspiration for the Emerald City was really a European cathedral.
Mm-hmm.
I looked at a couple of different things that I love. Some Gothic cathedrals, but also Gaudi's cathedral in Barcelona, and I kind of riffed on that, and to make the architecture of the Emerald City, and then the Wizard's Chamber was really all about his power. So there's, of course, the large marble head of the wizard, a kind of giant bust, which speaks to them and breathes fire and smoke and all that kind of stuff. But it's also, he's surrounded by, we made these masks, these kind of white masks that were about 2 feet across, that surrounded him, and they were sort of his court, his sycophants, his yes men. He was surrounded by a whole bunch of yes men who sort of, were these sort of disembodied faces, that were meant to be there to just kind of agree with everything he said, and to reinforce his ability to intimidate and convey a sense of power to anybody who came to visit him.
Mm-hmm. And then, of course, you have the Wicked Witch's lair, which we get to, and there's this industrial look to it. Can you talk a bit about that?
So, Harvey Fierstein, who adapted the book, described that as this kind of dripping boiler room. That so paradoxically, the witch has gone down there because it's sort of it's warm, it's got fire. It reminds us a little bit of hell, I guess. And so it's got all these blazing blast furnaces down there. But because of all that, it also has a plumbing system, which unfortunately leaks. And that freaks her out, of course, because water is the one thing that will destroy her. So the Winky, she's ordered the Winkies to put out buckets everywhere to collect the dripping water from this sort of antiquated pipe system. But yeah, it is meant to feel very much like a kind of scary, terrifying, dangerous factory where you feel like any one of the Winkies might be injured at a moment's notice because it's the working conditions are so poor down there.
Mm-hmm.
It's a place that OSHA has definitely not visited.
No, definitely. So one of the things that I loved about the design of this were the bold colors in it. that really do a good job of expressing mood.
Uh-huh.
Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, well, the piece itself feels like it demands that. It's the characters are so strong, and I guess I felt, not only to sort of back up these really strong characters, but also to reinforce the sense of journey, the sense of traveling, the sense of making these different places different. That these kind of bold colors, I think, were really useful for that. And sort of pushing that idea. It was a lot of fun to do, but it's tricky. It takes enormous coordination um, with the costume designer, so that you're really working in concert that way.
Hmm. The other thing that I liked was the way that you added some depth to the background through, I don't know if it was rear projection or if it was just um,
It was actually LED.
LED. Okay.
Yeah, we had a big LED screen upstage, and in the wings we also had some LED screens, and which were to help with the side shots. And yeah, that really was. Not only did it give us, I think, some depth. Um, it was also, there were essentially backdrops that could be changed very quickly, since they were run by video servers. Uh, but um, they also allow for a little bit of animation, which is really nice for some of the scene changes. So even though they were sort of digital backdrops, but it meant that when we went from one scene to another, we were able to do a kind of nice crossfade or an animated transition between the two.
Hmm. So talk about the sort of process of mounting a live television production, preparation, day of, any interesting behind the scenes stories that you can think of.
Well, it takes an enormous amount of rehearsal, and you have to layer in all the elements. So, of course, the actors have to rehearse offsite in a rehearsal hall. But once you get them on stage, we spent probably about a week rehearsing before we started adding technical elements, which is really just to um, get them used to the space, give the director and the choreographer time to adjust to the realities of being on the set. And then we started adding other elements like lighting, and I think we started with just one camera at first to sort of establish some of the looks, and then eventually the final phase of that was camera blocking. But by the time we got to the camera blocking, the actors were very confident about their performances and their choreography and the flow of the show. So really, really adding the cameras is sort of the final stage in that. But it's on a Broadway theater, we call that period tech period, and the technical rehearsals, and they're kind of like that, the technical rehearsals. But this, adding of all the different cameras, and what that does adds, of course, a whole nother layer to it. And then the other thing you have to do is is learn to deal with things that go wrong as it happens, because every time you do a rehearsal, something goes wrong, and there's always the possibility that that will be true on the night. And so being able to accommodate that becomes really, really important.
Hmm. Well, there has been a real influx of these, live television productions of
Yeah,
Broadway musicals.
it's
Um,
exciting.
yeah, it is. I mean, especially for a lot of people who may not be able to go see a Broadway show because
Sure.
of location or prices. Uh, what do you think? What do you think accounts for the popularity of these things?
Well, I think that I think people enjoy. Theater is really meant to be a communal experience, and
Hmm.
um, there is something different about watching something that's live, as opposed to pre-recorded, which you could watch it basically anytime. But the experience of watching something and knowing it's happening in real time as you're watching it, even if you're not in the same room, I think uh, I think in some way it makes a kind of funny sense of community among all the people around the country who are watching. And of course, people tweet about it and write to each other and comment. And I think that in a way that's a part of the community that's created out of the people who watch it. Undoubtedly, there are also people who are curious to see, what's going to go wrong while it's live. That's always a possibility. There's an energy that comes from watching it live, for sure. There's certainly an adrenaline behind the event, and it's also, it has a, some of that energy comes from the fact that it's never going to be quite perfect when it's live. There's no chance to go back and fix, a line or a phrase that wasn't sung as perfectly as it had been the day before. That just becomes a part of the texture of the whole event. And I think that I think it's proven that people like that in all sorts of different mediums. Despite the fact that not everything is perfect in life, and that there are some textures and richnesses that come from the slight imperfections.
Mm-hmm. So you're a Tony and an Emmy Award winner. Just wanted to ask what that recognition means to you.
Well, I guess it means a lot. It means that those are both awards that are bestowed by colleagues in the business. The Tony Awards by a group of colleagues who are producers and designers and actors and playwrights who all vote on that. So I guess it gives you a wonderful sense of belonging that you've been recognized by your peers, and it's the same with the Emmy. That's a much bigger group of people working in television. But the truth is that most of the voters, for those things are peers who work in your field, and so it's really kind of a great honor, which I take very, very seriously. To be recognized by peers, many of whom in the television business, many of them I don't actually know personally, and so it's really a lovely thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, congratulations, and thank you so much for your time. It's a pleasure talking to you.
My pleasure. Thanks. Nice talking to you too.
Thank you. Have a great day.